Hello all, this is the Owl, and you know what? Let's just dive right on in here, because I have a feeling that this could end up being another long one. Not as long as that last monstrosity to be sure, but long enough. Of course, if you haven't watched part 1, well, what are you doing here? Go and do that now. I'll wait. Otherwise, it's time to dive. After being driven off the cliff by the four-armed guardian, Umbra Hand, Reg lands somewhere far below, deep within some kind of a pit. He stands up, holding the clearly dead and broken Umbra Hand like a bag of spam, and turns to take stock of his surroundings. He's on a small raised area, surrounded by a seething sea of horrible, gibbering things. And yeah, if you've been paying attention, you might know where he is at present. A familiar, sinister voice floats out of the darkness at him, and Bondrewd steps forward, also seemingly none the worse for wear. As the creatures begin to clamber all over him, he reveals that he knows them all by name. Yup, these are the orphans from his earlier experiments. Remember Nanachi and Mitty's elevator fun times? Well, this is what generally happens, I guess. Creatures even more wretched and less sentient. The two go back and forth for a bit, but Bondrewd does allude to a possibly even darker truth here, mentioning that there is a breeding section for live specimens. And no, I am not even going to start to dissect that. You'll probably note me doing something similar when we come to what this Freudian horror show on layer 6 means. The two square off again, and Bondrewd reveals that he brought Reg down here deliberately. He wants both of them to be able to fight at their maximum power without further devastating Idor Front, and sure enough, Bondrewd lunges towards him, shredding through the hollows with seemingly no regard. Mate, weren't you just telling Reg, you know what, never mind. This will come up again later, but for now, remember this incident. It's one of a handful of things about Bondrewd that are either inconsistencies or, quite possibly, reveal a lot about his true nature and motivations in a pretty subtle way. Reg, though, is now thoroughly incensed, launching himself at Bondrewd again, cable whirring. Oh, I didn't actually spot this until this read-through, but one of Reg's eyes is still dark and has the tracer, so I guess the implication is that somehow Reg has been able to retain his power from the dark mode transformation while also somehow keeping his mind and thus his control intact. I really hope that this all gets explained eventually because, wow, am I confused. Regardless, just like that, the fight is on like Donkey Kong. Bondrewd fires gangway at Reg, but he's too fast, sliding under the shattering blast. bowling the madman off his feet and following this up with a powerful strike from his cable, launching Bondrewd into the air. Quick, juggle him! Only, yeah, again, this is quite subtle and clever. And it's one thing that I do like about how Made in Abyss is written. Once a rule has been laid out, Tsukushi doesn't waste his time recapping or re-explaining how the Abyss works. Sure enough, within the large tank on Bondrewd's back, strange, squelching sounds can be heard. Assumably, Reg popping him up caused the madman to become subject to the curse of Layer 6, but rather than mutating, the cartridges in his suit absorbed it and died. And speaking of, kind of a lot of really smart and subtle in a foreshadowing sort of way, things happen here. So let's go through them step by step. The pair clash again and rebound in midair, both lodging themselves on opposite walls of the pit. Bondrewd is surprised. Apparently, Reg is even faster now in this hybrid form than he was in dark mode. Reg reveals that, okay, someone, I'm guessing either Liza or the other girl. Yes, I know, later chapters, but remember, until we get there they basically don't exist. We will get there when we get there. Either way, it's really interesting. Bondrewd, in turn, is also experiencing something as more cartridges rupture within his suit. It appears that he's sprouting talons. What? Meanwhile, while whatever is happening to Bondrewd happens, Reg gets a transmission from Nanachi, revealing that she has a plan for this final round, and that he should listen up. Suddenly, with a resolute expression on his face, Reg bounds upwards, launching himself back towards Edo Front, with a surprised and annoyed Bondrewd in hot pursuit. Remember, he wanted to face Reg down in the miniature garden because they just blew up a large portion of his fancy fortress. The two trade blows, as well as blasts as they rise, with Reg fighting a desperate rearguard action. Far Caress narrowly misses him, and he fires an incinerator blast in response that, while Bondrewd is easily able to evade, does force him back for a second, buying Reg some room and allowing him to climb further. I think I might see what you're doing. Maybe. Yup, as we soon see. Nanachi's plan was for Reg to ascend and to force Bondrewd to pursue him, resulting in the mad scientist burning through his cartridges, assumably eventually running out and getting mittied himself. Some poetic justice, I guess, and if Ricor was able to destroy Zoaholic, that would be the end of him. Hell, even if they just managed to kill this body, it should allow everyone to find Prushka and escape, right? However, as we see, it's not going to be quite that easy. Reg also has a ticking clock. The 10-minute limit, since he fired his incinerator, is almost up, meaning that he will lapse into unconsciousness soon. And in a battle of endurance, the man with infinite bodies generally wins. The fighting retreat continues. Bondrewd burns through and ejects cartridge after cartridge, taunting Reg by calling them out by name, likely implying that he, at least in part, is killing them. Dude, we also see that Bondrewd is starting to look different, chunkier somehow, more bulky, and sure enough, one of his boots explodes, revealing that his leg now ends in a clasped, furry paw? Oh shit. Regardless, As the dam begins to flood down into the canyon, the two burst out onto the surface, revealing yet another of my favorite panels in this manga, and yeah, fair warning, I think from here on out there is generally at least one "this is now my favorite panel in the manga" moment. It's just, oh man, is this manga gorgeous. However, we do get to see that Bondrewd is indeed mutating, and as you might have twigged onto, this is really interesting and also another of my big "nope, I do not understand this at all" moments in the manga. So, as we'll see in a bit, Bondrewd explains that he's finally managed to achieve it, thanks to the cartridges and the mutative effects of the Layer 6 curse. What is it, you may ask? Well, Bondrewd has become a blessed hollow like Nanachi, achieving a pleasing form that is built to live in the abyss, and is also furry. Yes, I really hope this all gets explained as well. So, what is the part that I am confused about? Well, see if you spot it. How about now? See it yet? Yeah, that now furry mutated tail is not a part of Bondrewd. It is a relic called Third Works, and it was also busted up by Reg pretty badly, so why did this mutate? Feel free to let me know in the comments. There's also something that you're probably missing. I know I did the first time I read this, and it's, oh, you're gonna want to break out the hanky for this one, folks, but we'll get there in a bit. Regardless, Bondrewd ejects his cartridges. He no longer needs them. The party's plan hasn't merely failed. By the looks of things, they've actually made Bondrewd substantially stronger, and with Rico elsewhere and Reg due to collapse any second, what the hell do they do now? After the madman ejects his last 4 canned orphans, leaving them lying on the ground, he calls 3 of them out by name. However, before he can name the 4th, we hear a familiar sound as Mania rushes up to one, crying out plaintively and licking at the unmentionable fluids seeping out. Oh no. No, no, no. Nanachi takes a step back in shock and utter miserable horror as she realizes the significance of this. The nameless 4th cartridge is none other than Prushka. There was never any hope of saving her to begin with. The entire rescue mission wasn't just pointless, it was completely doomed from the outset. Their friend is dead. Bondrewd got everything he wanted, and now they are entirely at his mercy. Oh, and okay, I think I understand this, so let me attempt to explain. Bondrewd wasn't just looking for a way to return from Layer 6. After observing how Nanachi became a blessed hollow, allowing her to not only move up and down at will, but also perceive extrasensory aspects of the abyss, like the force field and the emotions of those within, he wanted to obtain it for himself. We'll get into Prushka's backstory in just a bit, but I think the implication here is that Bondrewd, okay, apologies for my choice of language here, but I honestly think it's not that far off, groomed Prushka to love him, then manipulated her, including the previous battle on the island, into not only willingly becoming a cartridge for him, but taking the double curse out of love, much as Mitty did for Nanachi, and this granted him his blessed form. You are one sick bastard. Now I am going to jump a little bit forward here to help this make more sense chronologically, but we see a bit later that Prushka was originally the subject of Bondrewd's early experiments. I'm guessing specifically involving the effects of the curse on young people, and as what looks like a toddler or very young child, suffered something similar to failure to thrive syndrome. And yes, this was amazingly hard to read as a new dad. Damn it, Tsukushi. Do you need to talk to someone? However, rather than putting Prushka down, Bondrewd instead, and I'm guessing here, decided at that point to try and heal her to, I guess, hold her in reserve for something else. Or maybe he did indeed feel some responsibility towards her. I am honestly not sure which is worse, to be honest, but he did eventually have some success in bringing her out of her catatonia by giving her mania as a pet. I have to wonder if this might not be a nod towards the actual practice of using animals and pets as a therapeutic solution for abused and neglected young children, and if so, holy crap, Tsukushi, what are you trying to do? Break my damn heart? Anyway, in an extended and honestly really lovely montage, we get to see Prushka grow into the girl we met. Unfortunately, there are rather a lot of boobs in this sequence, so I can't show you much. As always, you can go and check out the manga yourself if you want. But we do eventually see Bondrewd introducing her to cartridges and explains that this is a little girl that decided to help her papa, and that to achieve his own goals, he needs this help from Prushka, manipulating her into agreeing to help him. Yeah, that is evil, and it really boggles my mind how people can treat Bondrewd as some sort of tortured sexy man genius when this sequence exists. Oh, and yes, you were indeed correct. We get an explanation as to what these zombies were in the previous bit. I have no idea how I missed this, to be honest. As you said, they are failed Umbra hands, likely suffering irreparable brain damage from whatever process Zoaholic requires. I don't know. Regardless, the papier-mâché whistle is a gift from the irrepressible Prushka in an attempt to ease their suffering somewhat. We also see that Bondrewd did use Prushka as something of an unsuspecting Judas goat to put the party at ease, which is what allowed him to abscond with Nanachi and Reg. And to conclude the sequence, we first get to see another frigging heartbreaking sequence, showing her friendship with Riko developing from her side of things, as well as the results of Bondrewd's manipulation, seeing him apparently die and going into hysterics as the catalyst for her willingly becoming a cartridge, with the final part of this sequence being, nope, there's no way in hell that I am posting some of these panels on YouTube even censored. These two should be more than enough to explain why, but basically we get to see, from her perspective, Prushka being dismembered and vivisected. Remember when battlefield surgery was the darkest thing in this manga? Yeah, I miss those days, and I wish I could tell you that it gets better from here. Back in the present, Reg is about to bubble, but Nanachi calms him down. However, those are not tears of sadness. Reg is now incandescently furious at Bondrewd, chiding him for using his loving adopted daughter, who only wanted the best for him and even had good things to say about him, for such a cruel and selfish purpose. Bondrewd, in turn, is utterly unrepentant. By the way, Furororo might as well be subtitled as Evil Laugh, but he does reveal that he can now indeed read Reg's emotions, and also that this was part of his goal in preparation for the Dawn, likely Bondrewd's namesake, something that occurs every 2,000 years. And yes, this is an aspect of the story that has been gone over and dissected pretty thoroughly in the fan theories section on the Discord, as well as by Pooty Spaghetti over on their channel. Reg, however, is not standing for any of this crap and lunges in to attack. We also see that, oh damn it man, Riko overheard the entire thing and is leaning against a wall nearby, tears falling in sorrow and despair. But what is she doing here? Well, we'll learn why in just a bit. Reg and Bondrewd continue to battle with, oh holy crap, she's still alive, that is horrible. Prushka realizing that somehow, and I don't understand whether this is literal or figurative, but in her words, the madman is drawing power from her suffering. Reg is beginning to succumb to the effects of using his incinerator. They are very nearly out of time. Reg doesn't observe Bondrewd powering up both of his Sparagmos projectors, and then, when he desperately fires his incinerator, these are used in an ingenious fashion. Rather than dodging, Bondrewd instead literally breaks the blast with his stacked and layered beams, and is finally able to land a decisive strike on Reg with his now somehow mutated third works, and ends the fight by impaling Reg through his navel with one of his new claws. Gloating, Bondrewd reveals that he plans to cut Reg in half as his next experiment, but Reg reveals that he's realized something about himself. He's somehow designed to experience simulations of human sensations, ranging from arousal to pain, but these are, at the end of the day, merely simulations, and while a normal human would be paralyzed by pain now, he is able to overcome it and reveals a trump card. His dog print-like feet can also fire the incinerator. However, the now hyper-agile Bondrewd simply leaps over the blast and drives Reg's head into the ground. Oh dear. Suddenly, an incinerator blast seems to come out of literally nowhere, cutting straight through Bondrewd. What the hell? And then we see Riko carrying Reg's arm, firing the beam. It appears that somehow Reg can control his limb even when it's detached. Was this the true plan all along? If so, definitely one of those this is just crazy enough to work things, I guess. As he dies, we see Bondrewd recalling Prushka's last wish to him, that he give up his pursuit of the party and let them go in peace, as they were, at the end of the day, her first true friends. And after this, we see that Prushka is now truly dead, with Bondrewd bifurcated, much in the same manner he promised to do to Reg. The party has somehow emerged victorious in theory, but in practice, they are all in pretty rough shape. Reg is badly injured and drifting into unconsciousness, and they were not able to save Prushka. Riko is absolutely devastated by her failure. With her tormentor finally down and Mitty avenged, Nanachi tells Bondrewd that even though there are too many Umbra hands for them to fully wipe him out, they could now, if they so willed, destroy his facilities as well as Zoaholic to permanently bring his threat to a close, or at least guarantee that he never achieves what he hoped to. Astonishingly, he responds by congratulating her on their victory and wishing them all the best on their journey to the bottom. Nanachi, despite her hatred and long quest for revenge, finds that she's both surprisingly and genuinely touched by this gesture, and with that, the battle is finished. But where to from here? Without a white whistle, the party cannot use the relic to cross the boundary between Layers 5 and head down into the deep abyss of Layer 6. Barring any sudden and emotionally devastating twists, their journey ends here. Back with the party, Reg is recovering. Nanachi's done her best to bandage him up, but he's still in rough shape. Riko, however, is nearly inconsolable at the loss of her friend Prushka. Yeah, it's almost like a young child is going to be heavily traumatized by the tsunami of death, pain, and horror that this ridiculously bad idea of a quest has been. Somewhat understandable. At present, we see that Riko is still cradling Prushka's dead cartridge. Damn it, Tsukushi, ease up on us for a second, mate. And sobbing. She tries turning it, and to her horror, all of the awful stuff inside that was once her friend just pours out. Ugh. Only there's something else there. Something that gives Riko the same feeling Prushka once did. And yup, if that shape looks familiar to you, and yes, this is where I came down with a serious case of allergies this time, it's a white whistle. One that looks oddly like a heart, and as Riko cleans the blood and bile off it, it plays a mournful tone and seems to glow. Yup, remember what we know about white whistles. It must be given willingly, and this was Prushka's final gift to the party. Should Bondrewd keep his word and honor her last wish, or should they prevail against him, they would have a way to continue with their adventures. This was actually very cleverly foreshadowed. If you remember Bondrewd explaining whistles to Riko earlier, and saying that if you can't make it below yourself, you could possibly do so as a white whistle. Now, this next bit is odd, because if I remember correctly, Tsukushi clarified in an interview what happened during the missing time here, but apparently the party, honoring Prushka's wish, did not attempt to destroy Zoaholic, instead allowing Bondrewd to take a new body. He, in turn, allowed them to stay and rest at Edo Front, assumedly unmolested, until they were ready to head below, which is why Riko is eating the energy rations. It's also why Nanachi says later that she'll honor Riko's instructions, likely referring to this armistice with Bondrewd. Okay. And yes, this confused the pants off me during my first time through. As they leave to head below, they turn to see the defeated White Whistle, who has come out to see them off himself, flanked by several wicked-looking Umbra hands. His mask still retains the damage Reg inflicted, maybe to honor them, maybe because, with Prushka dead, there's no real reason to repair it. And that brings me to the character of Bondrewd and, You know, he's such a conundrum to me that I cannot help but find him fascinating. This isn't your standard evil bastard anime villain, or a sympathetic sad backstory, oh I just want to make a perfect world anime villain, or even a force of nature anime villain. Bondrewd is sort of all three at once. He's really, really evil, sometimes out of seeming curiosity more than anything else. He might care about his charges, and he does seem relatively post-human in that he essentially doesn't even have a body. I know Pooty is working on a big Bondrewd blowout video, but let's see if I can maybe throw my 2 cents into the ring. If I had to make sense of Bondrewd, I've got 4 theories, most of which could be true simultaneously. So before we see the party off, let's go through them. And as always, feel free to let me know what you think in the comments. Theory number 1. Bondrewd was a good person once, but his mind has become warped, not only by being down in the abyss for so long, but by constant and sustained use of Zoaholic, which was actually mentioned to be potentially harmful to the user's mind. And I think this theory is partially confirmed by Tsukushi's notes at the end of chapter 36. So this would mean that he's now pretty much a sociopath. And as sociopathy can be caused by a variety of neurological issues as well as psychological, well, who knows what happens when you don't have one constant body to mediate your emotions and neurochemistry. Theory number 2. Bondrewd is a Randian objectivist. Objectivism is, in this context, probably best oversimplified as all morality is subjective and thus the ends justify the means. It's also a big part of BioShock and, you know, the other day someone told me that BioShock was considered a really old dad game now, and bloody hell that cut deep. I can only imagine what you young whippersnappers think of classics like One Must Fall 2097. Oh right, so this would mean that Bondrewd knows what he's doing is wrong, but believes that what he's doing also means that, at the end of the day, it'll be worth it. And of course this ties right into number 3. Bondrewd knows something we don't, and is desperately trying to prepare for an incoming disaster. Cycles, wibbly-woo. Yeah, I still don't understand what's cutting there, but every 2,000 years in the Made in Abyss universe, a big thing happens that's implied to be both cataclysmic and massively important. And Bondrewd seems to be, well, doing a thing to get something done before it happens. I am guessing that we'll learn more about this as the manga progresses through its final arc, especially now that, by the looks of it, we're heading into Layer 7 proper. The 4th one is quite simply this. Bondrewd is evil, pure evil, and also an amazing manipulator, able to cultivate love in others towards him with both carefully considered actions and his dark charisma. He will do this so long as it suits his needs, but he is actually incapable of feeling true love for anyone. However, he's managed to convince himself that he's in the right, that he truly does love them, and this is all for the greater good. Self-manipulation, essentially. Probably the strongest evidence I can see of this is Bondrewd staging the battle with the party and his death to maneuver Prushka into agreeing to becoming a cartridge, and him devastating the low hollows of the miniature garden in his battle with Reg with seemingly no regard. Oh yes, and also evil laugh. But then, he genuinely did seem to care for Nanachi and was actually pleased after the party defeated him, wishing them all the best on their journey below. However, honestly, Tsukushi isn't really big on explaining things outside of interviews, so it could easily be that we will never know, and this body-hopping mad scientist will forever remain an enigma. At least until someone asks Tsukushi in an interview. Haha. Regardless, after a time, the party finds their way down to the relic chamber, and, dwarfed by the enormous pool of swirling water and the large portal ahead of them, they say their farewells and prepare to take their last dive. Who knows what awaits them below, down there in the darkness of Layer 6. And thus ends Volume 5 of Made in Abyss, as well as the final video in the first series. Next month? Well, we'll start on Layer 6. And trust me, if you thought Layer 5 was unnecessarily dark, well, you're right. But Layer 6 is just so much worse, in almost every way you can imagine. Although you will finally get to meet this character, and that makes it almost worth it. Wait, what was I talking about? Oh right, before we finish for the day, I just want to say a massive thanks, as always, to my wonderful patrons. Jake Reagan, Piece of Yeast, Elspresso, Cheerful Satanist, Starwin Marwin, Question Man 6, Kel Core, Jacob Ramsey, Crazy, Opinion Custard, James Bakes Bread, Wargle, Inukie Koji, Rose Montgomery, Lance Goebel, Paul Norberger, Rafferty, Erin Arnold, The Hedgehog Gamer, Simone, XTC Pill, B Empress, Jake, Ranger Danger, and Cheshire Quill. If you want to see more like this, why not stick around? Subscribe, bell, you know the drill. If you want to hear me say your name, get early access to most of my videos, have some fun perks on the Discord, and, you know, help Mrs. Owl and I out or buy Baby Owl a present, and ensure that I can keep on doing what I do into 2024, why not take a look at our Patreon? If you want to chit-chat about, well, basically anything, drop by our Twitch. We generally stream on Sundays, and next month we'll be going back to Fridays too. Take care, my friends, and cheers. This is the Owl, signing off.